Afternoon, folks. It is the word of the Lord, isn't it? And what a wonderful privilege to have that read and to have the opportunity now to consider it. We've prayed already, but bow with me again. Let's commit our time to God. Father, thank you. You are a God who speaks, and you speak in a way which we can understand. Help us to fix our mind and hearts on your real word, the focus of your word, the one who John calls the Word of God, Jesus Christ himself. And so speak to us. Give us, over this next couple of weeks, as we spend time in Mark's Gospel, just a bigger view of Jesus, so we can love him and we can serve him with all the energy that you graciously give us. In his name we ask. Amen. What you think of someone or something will determine the way you act towards them. I'm going to repeat that. What you think of someone or something will determine how you act towards them. I'll prove it to you. When I say the words Chelsea Football Club, of which shirt I'm currently wearing, and can I just say, have copped a lot of abuse. And thank you. You're going to make my point in a moment. It invokes a kind of response in you. If you're a football fan and you don't support Chelsea, well then, can I say, a deep dread and terror kind of wells up in your soul. Kind of hatred. We're going to just call it what it is, right? I want to say a kind of a jealousy, a spirit of unholy covetousness comes upon you. And you'll despise Chelsea, and you'll despise the poor Chelsea supporters. You just want to support their team, man. So you can have you can despise on one side, all the way through the spectrum of emotions and feelings to just apathy. So you're sitting here and might go, I don't even like football. I hate football. Or I'm neutral, kind of vanilla, you know? I don't really care for it, so you don't have any feelings, positive or negative, towards Chelsea or any other team. You can ignore them. So if they win, well, that's cool. If they don't win, well, it's also cool. And then you can go from all the way to absolutely loving them. Now, I'm a fan of Chelsea. I have the T-shirt. This is from the stadium. This got bought from the stadium. I didn't go there. A friend bought it for me. But bought me this shirt, and so I put the shirt on from time to time. And I watch a game from time to time. I wouldn't call myself a super fan of the club. You know, those fans that they go to every game or they watch every single game. They wear blue on game days. They sing the war cries. If you don't know football, each club has war cries that are sung in the stadiums. I just thought of a little joke. It can be quite fanatical. Yeah, sorry about that. Now, when you think about Chelsea, what you think about Chelsea will determine how you act towards them. Okay, it's a silly example, but it's true, isn't it? And it's true of many things that are in our lives, not just our pleasures or trivial things like sport, but also the big things. When I think about my financial planner, what I think about them will determine whether or not I heed their advice or whether I'm confident in it. What I think about my doctor and what their suggested kind of course of treatment will kind of determine whether I think I need to get a second opinion. See, when push comes to shove, you want to make sure that you've got the right person in your corner who you can trust. What you think about someone will determine how you act towards them. And can I say the exact same thing is true of Jesus? What you think of him this afternoon will determine how you treat him. And there's a wide spectrum of views, maybe even in this room here this afternoon. And many think that his claims were rubbish, rejected him completely, no time for him. Some might be a bit more apathetic. He's not really that relevant for my life. I'm not anti him, but I'm not really for him either. Some are casual fans, so they like a lot of what Jesus stood for. They like a lot of the things that he taught. He seemed to do good things. So, can get on board with that. And from time to time, might dip their head into the big moments of kind of Christian things. Pull on the shirt on game day. Jesus gets a look in crisis when there's big need in life. Or I'll kind of dip my toes into those big holidays, the Easter and the Christmas time. And then there's the far more fanatical ones. Those who are sold out for Jesus, right? These are the regular churchgoers. The ones who will go to church every week. They'll wear a cross around their neck. They will sacrifice their Sundays to get together. They'll sing war cries and anthems to him. They'll even go on church camp together over Easter. How you treat him is directly linked to who you think he is. And our series leading up to Easter is going to help us understand again the identity of this one, and then to know how to correctly respond to him. And it's what lies at the heart of Mark's gospel. So we're going to spend the next 5 weeks in Mark's gospel, from Mark chapter 8 all the way through to the end of the gospel. And we pick up the story where Jesus is having a conversation with his disciples. And it's a long walk. It's a 25-mile, day-long walk from a place called Bethsaida to Caesarea Philippi. And he asks them in verse 27 a question. So there he is. He went out with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the road he asked his disciples, "Who do the people say that I am?" What's the word on the ground? We're not sure how long that the disciples have actually been with Jesus at this point, probably in the region of a year or so. They'd been following him. And they were no doubt kind of rubbing shoulders with the crowds as Jesus was teaching and doing his ministry. And so the disciples would hear all the chitter-chatter of what the people are thinking. So, who do the people say I am? And the response is actually quite spectacular. Jesus had a lot of enemies, and those will become clearer as we go through our series. But have a look there. Some people say that he's John the Baptist. John was a very revered man, and John had just been executed by King Herod. And so many thought that actually Jesus was kind of John raised to life again. That's how much they revered John, a really great preacher. Some thought that he was Elijah. Elijah was a great prophet in the Old Testament, a miracle worker, one who spoke the very words of God. He was one who doesn't die. We're told that he was walking with Elisha, and out of the heavens came a flaming chariot and picked Elijah up and took him away. And so Israel, the Israelites, were expecting Elijah to return again. And thought maybe this is him. Maybe he's come. That was a long time ago, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But maybe this is him. Been waiting for an Elijah type figure to come back. Maybe it's him. Others thought he was a prophet. He said, one of the prophets. Now that's a big thing to claim. Quite a few prophets had come in the Old Testament, men like Jeremiah and Isaiah and Ezekiel. Those were men who spoke the very words of God to the people. So the crowds have an exceptionally high view of who this one in front of them is. At the very least, he's a man of God, a great teacher, a prophet, and a leader. And Jesus doesn't want to leave it there, this conversation. He wants to scratch a little bit deeper. Okay, well, that's what the people think. Turns it on his disciples. What do you think? Verse 29. What do you say? It's a very different question, isn't it? The crowds have seen bits and pieces of Jesus' ministry as he moved around. But the disciples have been following him. They've seen a lot more. How he calmed a storm. How he fed 5,000 people with just a few loaves, a couple of fish. How he healed a paralyzed man by just saying, "I tell you, stand, get up and walk." And the man jumps up and goes. He's healed a deaf man, he's healed a blind man, and he's raised a girl from the dead. There's something exceptionally special about this one standing before them. He has a kind of power that no one has ever seen before. And Peter recognizes it. Although the crowds kind of thought very highly of Jesus, it's actually not high enough. And in verse 29, we have the first recognition of Jesus' identity here in this gospel. Peter says, "You're the Messiah. You're the Messiah." Now, folks, don't let that wash over you. If you've gone to church all your life and you've heard that term, it's very easy to just go, "Yeah, he's the Messiah. Yeah, I know that." And you may have heard that 1,000 times, but just imagine, put your feet in the shoes of those disciples. Here is the Messiah. Who is he? Well, it's a very important title because the Messiah changes everything. The Messiah was that promised king. He was the one who's going to be the deliverer of Israel, the savior of the people. This is the one they've been waiting hundreds, if not thousands of years to arrive. And you might say, well, there's been loads of kings through history. What does it really have to do with us who live so long in the future of this event? Al mentioned a little bit earlier that the Zulu nation has got a new king. And I was listening to the radio this week as it was being announced, SAFM, and there had tons of callers phoning in. And a lot of people who were Zulu, and they were going, finally, we have a king. We have a leader. And it's so moving and stirring as you hear these people recognizing, yes, I've got someone I can follow after. But if you're not Zulu, you might go, well, having the Zulu king doesn't have much of a bearing on me. Is that the same with this one, this king that Israel are waiting for? Well, he's not just the king of Israel. He's not just the king for Israel. The Messiah is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. We're told that he's the creator of everything, this Messiah who is to come. And if he's the creator of everything that you see, he's your creator. This is your king who has come. No other king in history can boast that. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. And yet he's not the king that you'd expect. And he's definitely not the king the disciples expect. You are the Messiah, he says. And then Jesus goes on to say, don't tell anybody about that. Which is quite a strange thing, you would think. The King of Kings has arrived. Let's get to it. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. The disciples were expecting him to come and wipe out their enemies, to come and take over the world, to come and rule. Let's get on with it. Why is he keeping it on the down low? In that very same time, it's actually, I just left it off there, but it's the end of that last verse. Jesus says, don't say anything. Why? Because Jesus actually isn't interested in petty politics. He's come on a mission. And for the first time in Mark's gospel, Jesus tells us what he has come to do. Verse 31. He begins to teach them that it was necessary for the Son of Man to suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed and rise after 3 days. Hold up a second. King of Kings. The Messiah is meant to be defeating enemies. That doesn't sound like a victory, does it? For the king to die would be game over. It's the death of all hope for the disciples. For Israel, they're expecting their king to come and reign. So why do you say it's necessary for you to come and die? Some translations, thanks James for helping us think about translations. Some other translations say not just that it was necessary for him to come and die, but it says the Son of Man must die. Must die. If you're confused about the Son of Man language, that's also an Old Testament title. It was a person who was going to come and act with the very power of God. Jesus is saying that he is the one who is wielding the very power of God, and he's going to wield that very power in death. And I wonder if you notice, to suffer at the hands of the very people who are supposed to be waiting eagerly for him. Right? The chief priests, the elders, the scribes, these are the religious leaders. It's like saying if God came today, then there would be a march leading up to him of pastors, bishops, church elders, councils. They would be the ones at the front trying to stone him. It's such a shock. As one writer puts it, it is not humanity at its worst that will crucify the Son of God, but humanity at its absolute best. It seems almost absurd and so counter to what the disciples expect. So Peter takes Jesus aside. I wonder if you noticed that. Takes him aside, and he says, listen here, Messiah, King of Kings. No ways. That can't be. We're told there that he rebukes Jesus in verse 32. So although he recognizes Jesus' title, he actually hasn't really fully understood the role of the Messiah, what the Messiah is coming to do. He must suffer, he must die, and he must rise again. And so here's the first of just two very brief points for us this afternoon. The Messiah gives his life to save his people. Jesus is, and it was in Vedette's prayer so beautifully, Jesus is just such a wonderfully perfect king because he will die for people. He will do that. Something that's been moving is seeing leaders doing this in the world, and one who's kind of been hailed as a brilliant leader is the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, right? Here he's chosen to stay with his soldiers, and he's going to fight alongside his people against the Russian invasion. He's willing to lose his life if needs be. That's what we expect of our leaders. I wonder if you notice the Messiah actually does something more than that. He'll go further than that. He comes to die. He will die. He must die. And he didn't come to die for his friends. He came to die for his enemies. Folks, all people have turned away from God. We've seen it so clearly in the book of Romans in our series that we're working through. And the wages for sin is to face the very wrath of God. We've turned away from the life giver, and it means we deserve death. But the Messiah, God, comes on a rescue mission to put us back on the road of life and glory. But it comes at a cost, because the wrath of God needs to be dealt with somehow. Someone has to take that fall. What does the King do? The Creator, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He puts up his hand, he says, I'll do it. In fact, I must do it. I must do it. I will die. I will take that punishment. The Messiah has come to save a people for himself, and it will cost him everything. And there is no other way. There is no other way. Jesus needs to defeat sin and death, and he comes to defeat these enemies for us. Which is why he responds the way he does in verse 33. I wonder if you noticed, he turns around to Peter, who now says to him, no, you don't have to do that. No. Turning around and looking at his disciples, he rebukes Peter now in return, and he says, get behind me, Satan. You're not thinking about God's concerns, but human concerns. I don't think Jesus is saying that Peter is Satan. But what Peter has tried to convince Jesus is the same thing that Satan says right at the beginning of Jesus' ministry. Remember when Jesus is taken out and tested, and Satan takes him to the top of the temple, and he says, have a look at all the creation. Take it. It's yours. I'll give it to you. Take it for nothing. Have it. He falsely offers Jesus glory and power without suffering. But the road to glory has to be through suffering, because that is the only way he'll save the world. He's come to suffer. It's the only way we can be saved. And Jesus puts his hand up 2,000 years ago, and he said, I'll do it. The perfect one dies for the imperfect. This is what we're going to celebrate at Easter. Jesus taking the full weight of God's wrath on his shoulders that Good Friday. Your Creator does that for you. He is a wonderful King. He is a wonderful King. And this Easter is here to remind you of his love and his service and his sacrifice. The Messiah gives his life to save people. So what does that now do in us? Well, our series is called Hail to the King. So secondly, we have a Messiah who gives his life to save people. What should we do? Well, we'll give our lives. We'll give our lives for our Messiah. Have a look at verse 34. Calling the crowd along with him, with his disciples, he said to them, if anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. What is Jesus doing? He's calling for allegiance, isn't he? And it makes sense. If he is the king, that's enough. We should follow him. If he is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, we should follow after him. But especially being a king who is so loving and kind and gracious and caring. He's loved us with this love in this way. Well, we'll now want to give ourselves to him. We want to listen to his voice. Again, like in Ukraine, right? The people in Ukraine are heeding the call of the president. They are listening to him, even if it's hard, because they want to serve their leader. The same with Jesus. We want to serve the king. even if there is cost to that, and Jesus tells us the cost, he's very open and very honest with us about what it will mean to follow him. He says you'll need to deny yourself, to take up your cross, and then follow. So follow Jesus will be a life of humility, like his. I guess the question is, what does that mean? Well, it's rejecting my own self-interest. That's what to deny myself means. My life no longer revolves around me being the ruler of myself. I am not the king. That's part of the important thing of recognizing the Messiah, because when I recognize the Messiah, I realize that I'm not the Messiah, and how I often treat myself as such. I have the world revolving around me. I'm not the king. Jesus is the king, and so I need to bring his interests and his priorities and make them my interests and my priorities. My old self-serving life, which is about fueling my own ambitions and goals and ego, can be set aside. And now I want to achieve his goals, the goals of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and not for my glory, for his glory, and his glory alone. It's full surrender of me to him. And that won't be easy, Jesus says. It won't be easy. It's not an easy thing to do. It's costly. We have to pick up our cross, says Jesus. There's sacrifice involved with that. Now, for these disciples, the cross that Jesus speaks of is not a figurative one. They go and they lose their lives, their very lives, for their king. They die. The Roman rulers of this time were not sympathetic to the news of a Messiah, another king. The Roman rulers thought that they were the Messiah, and they didn't tolerate others worshiping another king. And so many Christians and many of these disciples died because they refused to worship the Caesar. Sometimes allegiance to Jesus will cost people their physical life. Now, we don't live under that kind of oppressive dictatorship. So carrying our crosses will probably, for now at least, won't mean death. And we don't have to feel guilty about that fact if our crosses are perhaps a little bit lighter than many Christians have had to endure through history, who have had to face that kind of oppression. But we will still have to carry a cross. We will. We will still have to surrender ourselves to him. We'll just have more life this side of eternity that we'll surrender to him. So what does surrendering look like? Well, Jesus gives us a clue. Verse 35. He says, whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life because of me and the gospel will save it. For what does it benefit someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit his life? Again, for the disciples, them trying to save their lives would mean denying Jesus there and then literally saving their necks. So recanting, saying, no, I don't believe this Jesus, when kind of hard pressed by those in authority. And Jesus says, yeah, you'll live a little bit longer, but then what? Verse 38, it's not on the screen, but verse 38 tells us that their temptation in the face of a powerful Caesar would be to feel shame, to be ashamed of Jesus, and to live this life of suffering. But if you try to save your life, Jesus says, you'll ultimately lose it. But if you lose your life for me, you will save it. If you walk this road with me, there is wonderful reward. It's worth it. Well, how do we, Christchurch Cascades, how are we tempted to try and save our lives? Probably include denying Jesus in some kind of way. Yeah, not in the face of a Caesar. But it might mean that we're tempted to deny him because we want to gain as much from this world as we can. Whether it's relationships or stuff or hobbies or status. Remember those Choose Your Own Adventure books when you were kids? Choose our own adventure. I want to be the Messiah. I will deny him. I will live my life to the full. I'll chase after whatever I want. And verse 38, I'll be tempted to feel ashamed for looking different in the face of a very powerful and attractive alternative which the world offers us of success and money and fortune and status and all these things. But Jesus says you can get all of those things and then lose something far more valuable. He says there, you can lose your life. Other translations talk about your soul. You lose your soul. Now, most of us probably won't gain the whole world, even if we tried. There would be stuff that we still wouldn't be able to get our hands on. But just imagine for a moment you did. Imagine everything you wanted, you got. You grew up with the best parents, went to the best schools. Because you got the best education, it meant you got the best career path. You earn the best salary. You buy the best house, have the best family, go on the best holidays. You have the best diet and best personal trainers. So it means you have the best body. You make the best investments so that when you retire, you have the best pension payout. And then you die and you have the best funeral with the best eulogies. You have the best coffin and the best tombstone. What use is the best when you end up losing everything? Naked you come into this world, and naked you will depart. And nothing you can earn or gain, no social connection, no status, will be able to help you. Verse 37, you won't be able to trade that somehow for eternal life one day. Can't buy you anything. Jesus is where you get a life. It's where you find it. The Messiah came to give it to you. He's not saying that you can't have a career or a house or a good education. You feel guilty about those things. But following him will mean that he will shape your priorities in this life. And he'll be able to turn you from having this bottomless pit of trying to grab hold of everything around you for yourself and change you into a servant like he is. We at Christchurch Cascades believe that we are a redeemed family of what? Servants on mission. You'll be able to use your job, not for you, not for the glory of your name, for him. Your house, your things, your relationships, to love others. That's the joy of our sacrifice. That's why Paul can say you can rejoice even in the trials. Even when I'm having to say no to some of the things that I want, I can say no and I can rejoice that I can love others instead. It's not kind of asceticism, which is suffering for the sake of being miserable. It's not what he calls us to. It's not that you can't have anything nice because there's some spiritual value in denying yourself of anything good. That's not what he's talking about. No, picking up our cross will mean loving others even if it costs me a bit of pride, maybe a bit of money. There's great reward in that, isn't there? I've got a mission to fulfill. It's not meaningless. I get to share the good things that God gives to me with others. I get to share my life with others. That is sacrifice. That is the sacrifice Jesus showed us. I love it that our King of Kings walks this path before us. Isn't that just amazing? Jesus doesn't make these commands of us and these demands of us from a palace in comfort, far away, where he's all nice and safe. It was prayed earlier. Jesus comes into a dusty cradle. Isn't that him? He calls us to do these things in the dusty streets of Israel. On his way to Jerusalem, where he's going to do what? Serve you and me. For our good. That's why we can rejoice in suffering. Even though it's hard, because it's not meaningless. It's not meaningless, this life that Jesus calls us to. God will use it all. And so, folks, the question is, what are you trying to hold back from the King? What are you denying him a look in? What are you trying to save for yourself? Where are you trying to save your own life? What road are you walking without him? What has gripped your heart? What has taken root of you? Today, Jesus has reminded you, he is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. And what we think of him will determine how we act towards him. Don't be a fan of Jesus the way I'm a fan of Chelsea. I'll wear the shirt on the big days when it's easy. When Chelsea lose, the shirt's not going on. Bag over my head. Ashamed. That's not how we serve this king. No, he calls us to deny ourselves. Isn't it amazing in the book of Acts? You've got these people who are willing to give up so much just to share in the very suffering of Jesus, and they're proud to take on that name. They can suffer like him. That is how we serve him. He is the king. There's no kind of spectrum. You serve him. Serve him. Get on and serve him. Maybe for the first time today. Maybe you've realized actually Jesus needs to serve you. This king needs to wash you clean. He came to save you. What a great day that would be if today you go, yeah, you're the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, I'm not. Gee, that's a breakthrough. Trust him. He offers you life. That's why he came. He came to save. And maybe you've gone off the tracks a little bit. Maybe you've become like a fan, not a super fan. You know? Serve him from time to time. He'll come on a Sunday, get involved every now and then. No, be reminded of this king. Recognize him for who he is. He has served you. And commit yourself to him. And some people might think that you're a crazy Jesus freak who sacrifices for him, have different priorities than what you used to. That's okay. Because what you're walking is the road to life. And as they see you do this, they'll see what your king is like. A good servant king.